introduced through more of a Janay lens, that's really the catalyst here. And we see that it's changing not only how we work, it's also changing how we educate ourselves. It changes our access to education, our access to work, our access to even creating businesses or creating products.
Welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology.
This is Darren Pulsipher, Chief Solution Architect, author, and most importantly, your host. On this episode, Disrupting the Norm, How AI and Innovation Will Redition Society, with futurists and authors Dr. Janay, Duane, and Steve Fisher. Janay, Steve, welcome to the show.
Oh, Darren, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, it was a pleasure when we first talked the first time. I said, I got to get these two on the show because there's a lot of dynamics there, a husband and wife team, writing books together. I bet there's tension at times and happiness at other times. I can imagine all the emotions because I've written a couple books, not with my wife, but that's on our plans. We'll see if we can survive that.
You think you know your spouse. And then you write it together.
I bet you do. But before we dive into what we're going to talk about today and these big, huge glacial shifts that we're seeing in society, and we'll talk about that in a second. But before, on my show, anyone that listens knows that I only have superheroes on my show, and every superhero has an origin story. And what's your guys' origin story?
Steve, Janay, you want to start?
No, you should go. It definitely.
Yeah, sure. So I'm happy to start. My story is some view it as very unusual, but I do not, meaning that it's a non-linear path, and I find that most folks have a non-linear path. So growing up, I helped to raise my siblings. I'm one of five and the oldest of five. And there was a lot during that time that informed how I approach the world today, my work ethic, just my perception of how things unfold and what we bring to the table. And so that's a large part of my identity now. It's, very much, though it's evolved, it's still very much there. But I started off as an opera singer. And so,
you're to my heart. I love music.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah. I've had two other opera singers on the show that are technologists now. And I'm one of them. Her name is Sarah Music. What an incredible name for an opera singer, Sarah Music.
Listen, if you're going to be an opera singer, that is the last name to have. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, let's be honest, Janay. Let's be honest, Janay. You have a name that you can just go by, like you can be Beyonce, like a Beyonce.
Yeah, Janay. That's a cool name. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Listen, I'll keep it. I mean, it's when thinking about to go back to opera singing, there's so much that I learned about how to learn through that process and through that career that it very much translates into everything that I currently do. So fast forward to about 2006, soon to be 2007. I was running offline events for rise.com, which was one of the first social networking sites. I was also bartending. I was taking the bus down to the Metropolitan Opera to do my voice lessons and coaching. And by accident, during that time, I started my first company, which was an international women's organization. I started with $100 and grew it to 55 chapters in 7 countries in less than 9 months. Had no idea.
Incredible.
Yeah, it was fun. But I mean, honestly, Darren, I had no idea what I was doing. So and I had a really great working board, and we hustled a lot, and just we made also a lot of mistakes, a lot of first time founder mistakes. But and we could dive into that if you want. But from that, I ended up sunsetting that company, starting up a growth hacking marketing agency, which then ended up being an acqui-hire into another agency. And then by the time Steve and I met, we once we got together, we realized that our shared love and passion was thinking about the future, and but really focusing in on corporate innovation. And so we founded our first company together, when we first got together, and focused on corporate innovation, building out innovation hubs for secondary cities and organizations. And then, fast forward, we are now 14 years in, and together at least. And though the company hasn't been around that long, but yeah, now we're working on moonshot factories for industries, and working on space ventures, and really thinking about the future. So,
Oh, that's super cool. So, Steve, how can you stand up to that? I mean,
So I had her go first. I'm tapping out. I'm good. No, it's a heck of a background. Mine is a little less illustrious than that. So I started, as a kid, I wanted to be a pilot, wanted to be a fighter pilot. Who didn't? I was a child of the 80s. But that's a reference to the fact that, I was a voracious reader, and I would read tons of books. We didn't have the internet back then. And one of the books I read was Future Shock. And I was a hard sci-fi reader. I read a lot of sci-fi, and I really dove into it. I mean, design fiction, science fiction is it is the original design fiction. And we'll talk about that later in the show, what design fiction is. But the fact is that Future Shock by Alvin Toffler and Heidi Toffler, the Futures power couple, which, would be nice to follow in their steps. So I was like, wow, you could do this as a job. Like, you think about the future. And it wasn't, anything that I was like, I'm not going to do it. I thought it was really awesome. And I was into guitars and cars and girls, and, and that was where that was. I got the traditional business degree, but I fell into tech. And I always talk about futurists, though. Every futurist I interview on my show is Think Forward. Like, everybody comes to futures as an accidentally. They discover it. They have an aha, but no one's like, when they're young, like, I want to be a doctor or an astronaut. No one's like, I want to be a futurist. And I think we need to change that. I think we need to change that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to do that. We both are trying to do that. But basically, my name is Steve, and I make things. So I got into building digital and, software products in the 90s, got, the internet early on. That served me well. But one of the things I've always been good at, and Janay and I talked about this on her show, was like, is this a gift or an innate thing? I've always been able to see things if they're going to kind of fail or not, or things farther out. And I pivoted my career, and it served me pretty well. And obviously, a lot of people are doing the pivot now with AI. But through the years, I got into doing design, and I really found that, that's where my love is, because I studied architecture casually in college, but I knew it wasn't my end career. And I always have been an artist and a musician as well. So for me, the art of design, being a design futurist, allowed me to take the communication and synthesis of touching, tasting, feeling, and understanding the future in a tangible way, with all the other aspects to doing futures work. And I can get into what, kind of the futurist does generally, but what it allowed us to do, and I started a few companies, and we wrote Startup Equation together a couple of years ago. And, that was kind of a culmination of those experiences and how to help people frame it. This is similar to that, as we're seeing changes and massive shifts in the world, and it is cyclical. But it's more so accelerated because of AI. We feel the change. And where I am now, through my career is I worked at McKinsey and helped create the futures practice there. And, so I've worked in agencies, I worked in my own stuff, worked in enterprise, and obviously big consulting. So now it's kind of like where do we go to next, which is what Janay mentioned, is doing these books, doing this with the Human Frontier Institute, building moonshot factories, really helping expand things at scale to really create the future instead of like being fearful of it, I think is where we are.
Yeah, no, because this is really interesting. You being a futurist, both of you, the last 5 years has been incredible,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, 2 black swan events almost back to back. The pandemic shut everything down and accelerated IT roadmaps from years to weeks, as we saw people shift all of their IT resources, and there was tons of money being spent to get the economy stable when everything started shutting down. And then not less than a year and 9 months, a year and 10 months later, ChatGPT launches and completely rattles the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're still feeling the repercussions of that. Did you guys see anything, I mean, like that coming? And do you see anything like that coming again? To me, this is a once in a lifetime, maybe once in every 200 years, that we see something so profound to our society as these 2 major events.
I love that we both.
If I may, I'll bridge, and then Janay,
right.
you can follow
up.
up.
Yeah.
I mean, we both saw it. I mean, I will be the first one to admit that I could see it pivoting, but also I was a little anti AI because of how it was learning. Like it was taking people's work and it was just stealing. It was stealing.
Oh yeah, that genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah, it was very. I was very kind of against, for the first time, like really kind of raging against the machine. And then I saw the power, what it could do to make tell stories, to what it could do to AI powered foresight. We teach a lot. AI powered innovation work, and now there's a lot of human in that, but some of the idea, like some of the aspects of it that you could accelerate, that's where kind of the light bulb went off for me. And to your point, Super Shifts is about one of the first part of, well, there's 5 things in Super Shifts, but the first one is the age of intelligence and the ages and eras theory. That, I mean, every 200 years we have 4 50-year eras. This we call the age of quantum, because it's really going to power really everything transformational. But every 200 years, the last was the age of the machines. This is the age of intelligence, and we're not just like stopping and starting an age, but it's kind of, it's evolved. It's been happening in the last 5-6 years. And you're right. Yeah. When there's systemic shock, and Janay is the systems thinker of the house here, so she should talk to the transform model, is that there's got to be a new way of approaching it, because you can't just look at the systems these last 200 years. We've have our education system. Everything is based off of that. Factories, 9 to 5. It's, and this,
yeah, you're absolutely right. It is
everything, public school. Everyone thinks it's like burn down the system. Well, because everyone won't change, and there's such a resistance, but we see the mistrust and the collapse of institutions, rightly so, because we need new ones.
Before we go to Janay on this, I want to talk about that one thing that you just brought out, and maybe Janay can answer. We've got systems in place that have done us very well for 200 years, almost since the founding of the United States. And right. Now with this fundamental shift, how in the world can we move forward without burning down the old systems?
Well, I think that's the point, right, Darren, is that we moved from the farm into cities, and we created cities around these factories. And that was a large part of those centralized models of working in the factory, same, in the same spot, 9 to 5, having your where you live actually, planned out around the factory so that you're close enough to be able to get to work. The school system built around the factory model so that as your children get educated, it also works around, again, the needs of the factory. Those centralized models we saw during COVID start to break down, and the tensions that we're feeling now are the tensions that you feel when you have a system that you have had, a legacy system, and you're not willing to let go of that system yet, but you know that there's an evolution for a new system and a need for a new system. And that's where we're starting to head. And we saw that need and started to feel that friction during COVID. And we will continue to feel that friction as we evolve into some of these new systems of the future, whether it's systems in which we work or our educational system. I mean, I work at a university. I know our system is broken. Honestly, anyone I talk to within the university knows, but we have not yet come together collectively to then say, great, what is this new educational system of the future that we can then implement and move forward? So everyone's waiting for someone else to disrupt the system instead of us collectively deciding, hey, we know the system needs to be disrupted. Let's do it ourselves. And so, well,
a lot of times we need an external catalyst.
Right, but this is, and to your initial point around AI, which was, I'll say, introduced through more of a Gen AI lens. That's really the catalyst here, and we see that it's changing not only how we work, it's also changing how we educate ourselves. It changes our access to education, our access to work, our access to even creating businesses or creating products. And so as we're thinking about what this means for the future, I mean, it's our opportunity to go, instead of having me wait for someone else tell me how this should be or how this should work, this is my moment in time to start to explore what that could mean for me, what I could build, how I could really push my boundaries of what I am comfortable doing or even exploring, because that's really where we are going to start to create some of these new models. And hopefully, it's my hope, more of a symbiosis, much like we see in nature, but more of a symbiosis with AI, because AI is not going away. And
no,
so,
it's not.
Yeah.
So this brings up an interesting thing that I'm starting to see. When COVID hit, we all moved remote, and we heard this incredible thing. Productivity numbers are up. People are more engaged with their families again. People are getting more engaged with their communities where they live instead of where they work. That shift happened. But I've seen over the last probably 12 months, last maybe year and a half, big corporations are demanding go back to the office. And do you think that is because they felt like they've lost control and that they want to get back to the original system that they're comfortable with? Because I think we all know that that's a double-edged sword working from home. I can be more productive, but I can also do lots of other things. I can have side gigs. I can do all of a sudden, the big corporations or the system that has been formed over the last 200 years is feeling threatened. Does that make any sense?
So much to say here.
Good, Steve.
So, Janay knows I'm like, I talk about this a lot. Well, first, let's look at the narrative. Let's look at what the media has been pushed from, the corporations who have pushed the media to write these stories, write these things about return to office. One, they did this, and I was at McKinsey at the time, and Luckily, 2 years before that, they moved to Slack, Zoom, and Miro for like design work. So we were able to move online overnight. They were on Lotus Notes for 20 years. Yeah, if you're old enough, you're like gonna be like, what? 28? Yeah, right.
Oh
It
yeah,
was
I'm old enough.
before my time, but when I heard about what their infrastructure, they would have been dead in the water. These companies moved remote out of survival because they were going to be gone, and people were
Yeah,
going to
they
go.
were
It
gonna
would have
die.
been
Yeah.
it would have been, all those apocalyptic novels that I read. That would have, it would have been very much true. So they did it out of survival, and they saw that it was working for the most part. And my team was all over the world. Give me a reason I need to drive an hour each way to get on Zoom, and then you take away all my. I don't even have a space that's mine. I have to, basically like fight for a space. So I
Yeah.
don't even have a place or feel like it's a place I'm welcome. And then you want me to come back, and it was like, no, I'm not. And it became contentious because the reality is, anybody, for the listeners out there, when you hear these stories, ask who is writing it, ask who is saying it, and ask what commercial real estate investments they might have.
Yeah.
Just put that out to see if Jamie Dimons and all these other people, he can say all he wants. He should be in the office. I dare you to ask him if he would actually spend a day in an open office environment around all of his coworkers and eat lunch or try and find a desk. I bet you he doesn't have a lifestyle like that, even though he's telling
Yeah.
everyone else to do it. Trust me, I've never worked for Goldman Sachs, so I'm just going to say it. But I think that we realize that they write all this that people can't be trusted. I don't believe that at all. I think it depends on the work. I think if you're a knowledge worker or if you're going to put in keystroke, other systems and other things, and you don't trust them, yeah. If I'm looking for a job, it says remote, hybrid, or in office. People are self-selecting anyway because they know that if they know that it works and their lifestyle is like, I have to take my kid to school or I can't do this, they're going to pick the jobs they want. But in the end, too, a lot of this return to office is also a way to reduce the force, get people to self-select out and attrition without having layoffs because it's cheaper that way. So there's a lot of things around it. But the genie, like you said about AI, is out of the bottle. So is this. So any company that wants to truly compete and have access to a talent pool, but has good systems in place to essentially track productivity and output, they can run just like with AI. They can do the power of 10 to 1 over a company that is wanting people to be butt in the seat 9 to 5.
Well, I think they go hand in hand
I
because
agree.
generative AI, and AI has been around a long time, so I kind of spell it out as generative AI because that was the thing that unleashed, right? But generative AI gives me the ability to do a whole lot more and to do it remote. I can still collaborate with my teams more effectively as well and stop doing grunt work. My Gen AI does the grunt work for me now,
Yeah.
right? And so I think those two kind of go hand in hand because now I've got teams that are more creative and they can start thinking more strategically than battling out the politics at the water cooler inside the office. But the big but
You should
is
you should get
face.
Janay to talk about the academic side of this because she's a professor at Brown. That is a
Yeah,
different world.
yeah. There's something about being face to face too, right, Janay? I mean, I teach at Vanderbilt University, and I taught an online class this year, and we'll touch on that later. But Janay, I mean, face to face time seems to be the human interaction seems to be very important still.
Yeah, I absolutely, if there's a need or a want to interact with other individuals, and there's a need to do that for your work or for, then I say build it into the cadence and identify when that makes sense, but it doesn't make sense all the time, right? And then I also want to go back to I want to go back, Darren, to the point that you just touched upon in regards to Gen AI helping with work. So many companies now are becoming essentially information businesses where they're able to take their products and wrap them in data and repackage them and resell them depending on the data that they can utilize. And that's largely because of either the data lakes that are being created or even the machine learning algorithms that companies now have that and the rags that companies have for productivity. So there's so much from a data and an AI perspective that is changing what it means to do business in today's age, that the question then becomes, great, where are the touch points for human connection? And can we just be more intentional about that instead of assuming, to what Steve said earlier, I need to drive an hour and sometimes two, because if you live, we live outside of Boston, about an hour and a half to 2 hours each way. And what if I don't have any meetings, but you still want me there? So that's, that's what I question, is the why, and how can we just be more intentional about the human connection and those moments in order to really be not only effective, but intentional about the work that we're doing.
Thanks, Janay and Steve, for your great insights. Tune in to our next episode where I continue this enlightening interview with Janay and Steve about our future.
Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and embrace the digital revolution.